This is how we deal with trauma when we don't want to talk woo-woo.
Exactly. So it's cool to have multiple tools at your disposal because some of your clients, they may have wanted to try out the woo woo thing, but the thing that may actually be most helpful may not actually be woo woo at all. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you can't invite them for services because these are just tools in your toolbox. You don't have to always use the woo woo thing.
I've noticed that a mixture of both seems to be the most effective.
Which?
Mixture of both.
Oh.
Because people do really well. I don't think that just talk therapy really helps people, but when people have solutions accompanied but through the talking, it helps create a pathway for them to think through things.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you're just talking them through one thing, sometimes people can be like, oh, this hammer works on multiple things.
Called Fulfill Life Yourself, FLY. So it's affectionately called FLY. Basically, there are premises that you have heard from a lot of different personal development gurus or motivational coaches. But what has happened is the owner, I don't know if it's a co-ownership situation, but it's a father-daughter duo. Lamont Wilcox and Mikhail, not Wilcox anymore, Kessler. Lamont and Mikhail put together a model of ways of thinking about yourself and the things going around you so that you can achieve. Hesitate to give any promises, but you can look up that organization. But here's a gist. If you're thinking neuroscientifically, and I am not a neuroscientist, so just allow me to be a little vague. Your body runs off of electrical impulses and neurochemical needs. When you are deficient in a neurochemical, your body actually builds it on its own without anything else. So let's just four neurochemicals: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and dopamine, endorphins. If you are low in endorphins, you have a need for variety. So someone may go into work, create a little chaos with their coworkers because they've stirred some things up and they get a little bit of variety out of that. But you also get some collateral damage out of that because now you've got a reputation for being shit stir or disruptive in the workplace, but you were just trying to meet a neurochemical need. But because your brain already creates neurochemicals, what if you could find a different way to meet that neurochemical deficiency? So instead of creating collateral damage and slowing you down toward your goals, what if you could create something that actually took you toward your goals? That's the gist of the fly model, is that they help you identify what things are distracting you away from your goals and help you notice it for one thing, and then design different ways to bring you towards things that you actually want by actually using your neurochemical deficiencies. So on one hand, you're meeting neurochemical needs, and on the second hand, you're getting things that you actually want, and it's quite remarkable.
The way I like to think of it, as they're teaching you how to ask yourself questions so that you can reach solutions to problems that you're having. It's great.
Do you mind giving an example?
Of questions that you ask yourself?
Questions and positive results.
I mean, if you're feeling anxious, for example, and you're like, well, why am I feeling anxious? And you're like, well, I'm feeling anxious about my job interview, for example. And you're like, okay, so why are you anxious about the job interview? You don't know if you're going to get the job. You don't know how the interview is going to go. You don't know how talking to them is going to go. You are uncomfortable with communication. It can be anything. Typically, it leads back to either a lack of certainty or some other issue. Usually my stuff's lack of certainty. Is there something else that you would think that would happen?
So many people can have the same situation, and for them, it's a different neurochemical deficiency.
That's what I'm trying to think of it. So for me, it would be uncertainty. For someone else, it would be what's another
significance, a sense of who I am. Yeah.
Could be a feeling of lack of significance. So at that point, you ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? What is causing it? How could I make it better? What is the chemical need that I'm not getting? How can I meet this chemical need in a productive way? What do I want to achieve? And what is something that I can do that gives me the significance or certainty that I'm looking for? And usually that way you can identify a path forward. And I gave an example of certainty, but I guess if you wanted variety, you had maybe a lack of variety in your life and you're like, I'm super bored. I always hear the same things. I always look at the same four walls. I'm getting anxious. There's no variety. It's a good way to know that you're going to get variety. You can do some jumping jacks. Do you do jumping jacks? Do you run outside your door and scream often? You can do that. That's variety. You could go on a walk, and all of these things produce variety in your life. And it just depends on what you consider variety, because what could be variety for me may not be variety for you. For some people, it could be downhill mountain biking, and some people, it could be walking outside their house. It really depends on what kind of person you are.
But in the fly model, it becomes more than just the activity that you're doing. You want to actually link it to a goal that you actually want. So yes, if you wanted to run outside your door and scream, you will get some variety. But the question is, for what end? So for what purpose are you running outside your door and screaming? And if it's not linked to something that you want, then all you have done is meet a neurochemical deficiency, and you've not actually hacked your biodiversity to be able to get something that you want. So there's a little more to the fly model than just doing something expected when you want variety. Hilarious.
Well, you were saying something that someone could test.
Yes.
Right? That's a testable option that
Yes.
doesn't require a whole lot of effort. You can test that you're like, oh, that does work. So now I'm a little bit more motivated to actually dig in and figure out what the goal is that I could achieve by accomplishing this.
Interesting. I like it.
Right? So sometimes it's hard to get to the end goal too. So if you have a bunch of little things that help you get the neurochemicals along the way, it can help too.
That's actually the trap. So the idea of steps and doing little things to get to your goal is counterproductive to actually getting your goal. Have you considered that?
Yeah.
So I don't know where you're at with the fly model, but are your goals big?
But it's more like, say you're in the moment and you've got like 5 minutes before your interview and you're anxious. You don't have that time. You don't have enough time to sit and delve all of it. What provides me with certainty? And you're like, okay, I do this. They're like ways to get you through your day as you're on your long path there. It almost seems like it's not okay sometimes to do those little steps, but those little coping mechanisms are what get you to your bigger one. Maybe you do them succinctly.
So what you're talking about is more a consistency thing than steps. So this is your neurodivergent trying to talk to my neurodivergent, and we're trying to find the language between them. It's interesting.
Because in my mind, all the little things help me get through my day while I'm working towards the big things. So I'm really anxious and I'm having a hard time doing this or that. And I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to get through this point. I can do this and this will help. It also creates the awareness to know what to look for and the little practices that get your brain more used to things. Because you're not just going to go from A to B in a day. Getting your brain more aware and practicing it and doing those sorts of things are the things that help.
Nice. I like it.